Hello and welcome. I'm Aditi Kinkabwala, and before I was an NFL reporter, I was the daughter of a teacher. I'm actually still the daughter of a teacher, and that is why I am personally so excited for today's program. We are so grateful that you are joining us for the first ever Champions for Education event. We believe every child deserves the equal opportunity for and access to a quality education. And so to move this very vital conversation forward today, we've brought together some of the most influential and passionate advocates to share with us their experiences, their solutions, and their ideas to address key issues in education today. Teachers don't have the resources that they need to teach. Students don't have the tools that they need to learn. The achievement gap and the digital divide are only widening. And every issue in education has only been exacerbated by what is going on with COVID. This is an already overburdened educational system that is facing an even greater strain. And so our goal for tonight is that all of our educators, all of our participants, leave tonight with a renewed sense of hope and energy, with a feeling that real solutions and change are indeed taking place and are at hand. And for everybody else, hopefully a renewed commitment to unify behind our teachers, our students, because they are the champions. We are the champions that they need for education. And so here at Kids in Need Foundation, we believe that together we can affect real change. And that change must come now. So before we get into the meat of anything, let's just take care of a little bit of housekeeping. First, the bios of all of our notable and fabulous guests are listed below. Second, we are hoping that this is an interactive conversation. So please join us on Twitter with the hashtag Champions for Education. And last but not least, of course, thank you to our sponsors who have made this possible. ECRM, Blue Sky, PNC Bank, SureTape, and Zappos. And in particular, our friends for the event tonight, Internet Essentials from Comcast, Trox, Zebra Pen, and Highway Credit Union. So settle in, relax, and let's get moving on what we're really expecting to be an insightful and inspiring time together. To kick us off, it is my great honor to introduce Corey Gordon, the CEO of the Kids in Need Foundation, and a man who very, very personally knows the magical power of educational opportunity. Corey, please take it away.
Thank you, Aditi. Greetings and a warm welcome to all. Thank you for joining us today at our first Champions for Education event and for your support of teachers and underserved students across the country. Education has been called a great equalizer, yet when one's skin color and zip code work against teachers being able to teach and learners to learn, that's not great nor equal. That's a social injustice that we cannot continue to allow, and why we're here today. Obviously, 2020 was an incredibly challenging year on many fronts, with COVID upsetting the proverbial apple cart for all of our schools, our teachers, and our students. However, let's be clear, COVID did not create the issues behind the achievement gap, the digital divide, or student absenteeism. Rather, COVID only exacerbated and shined a glaring spotlight on a scourge that's been in education for far too long. Our hope is that that bright spotlight has sufficiently elevated the levels of awareness that we can actually confront these issues once and for all. So tonight, we're going to hear from an incredible lineup of champions and speakers from across our great nation. However, this is going to be far more than just talk and polite conversation. Our teachers and our students are well beyond just more talk and opinions. We owe it to them for real solutions and real impact in ensuring equality in education for all of our students and for the teachers who work so tirelessly on the front lines for our kids. So again, thank you and welcome.
I'm sorry, I was muted right there. Corey, thank you so much. Our first guest tonight is Jeremy Anderson, who is the president of the Education Commission of States. Now, he is going to lay out the most critical issues in our educational ecosystem today. Jeremy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Aditi. As the child of two teachers myself, I am honored to be with you today supporting the Kids in Need Foundation. I'm Jeremy Anderson, the president of the Education Commission of the States, and I'm here to quickly provide an update on some of the key education policy areas where we have seen states across our nation taking action during this COVID pandemic. At the Education Commission of the States, we track every single piece of education in all 50 states. We do this to help governors, legislators, state chief school officers, and state school boards learn from each other on what policies are working. In 2020, we tracked thousands of education policies in all 50 states, including 598 COVID-related bills, of which 134 of them became law in 34 states. Many of these bills were focused on an acute problem for marginalized groups from historically disadvantaged communities. Before the pandemic, vital education resources like school funding, qualified teachers, textbooks, even technology were not distributed in equitable ways. Equality and equity have been exacerbated during this pandemic. Students' needs are just not all the same, and they require different levels of service and different resources for each to succeed. Three key areas where we have seen states taking action are around the digital divide, student absenteeism, and the opportunity gap. The digital divide exists between students who have access to the internet and those who do not. This divide significantly affects Black, Hispanic, and Native American students, students from lower income households, and students who live in rural areas. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the digital divide. 36 state governors used their Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds from the federal government to invest in broadband and digital services. 4 states you should look at have focused specifically on achieving a 1-to-1 ratio for students to educational devices. Those states are Alabama, Connecticut, Mississippi, and Washington. Just 1 month ago, Connecticut announced that it was the first in the nation to provide learning devices to every K-12 student in need. The second issue is student absenteeism. Pandemic instruction has made it very difficult for schools to track which students are attending class and which ones are completing their schoolwork. While data for attendance is limited compared to other years due to disruptions to annual attendance counts, a recent estimate suggests that approximately 3 million students, or 6% of all K-12 students, have received little, if any, education since March, almost a year ago. Student populations at high risk for chronic absenteeism include students in foster care, students experiencing homelessness, English language learners, students with disabilities, students of color, and students from low-income families. Michigan is one state you can learn from, as they changed some of their education policies and now require a weekly two-way interaction between individual students and teachers in addition to the students' daily work. The goal of this policy is to promote greater student engagement during the pandemic. The third and last issue I'm going to touch on is the opportunity gap. The opportunity gap existed before the pandemic, and it existed between Black, Hispanic, and Native students compared with their white peers. During this pandemic, Black and Hispanic students are more likely than their white peers to be participating in remote learning rather than in-person learning in their school. When we compare the amount of students and what they learned in 2019-2020 school year to our historical scores, we can see that students are experiencing significant learning losses across the board. Schools with more than 50% of students of color are experiencing even more severe rates of learning loss than schools where their population has more than 50% of white students. 17 state governors have used Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funds focused on the opportunity gap. States focused on eliminating this opportunity gap include Arizona and Missouri. Both have policies focused on additional supports for students in reading and math and learning acceleration processes that include both before and after school interventions. Across our state, the country has been focused on solving problems that were created before and unfortunately exacerbated by this pandemic, specifically around the digital divide, student absenteeism, and the opportunity gap. Please look at our website at ecs.org and let me know how we can better help you see education policies that can help in your state and around these very important key issues. Thank you, and thank you for your support of the Kids in Need Foundation.
Jeremy, being the child of one teacher was bad enough. I can't imagine having two and what that meant your weekends were like, or the days that you brought your report cards home. Thank you for the time, and thank you for personally, clearly caring this much about what you learned when you were that young. So now let's go ahead and get started with our first topic, the achievement gap. As most of you already know, that's the disparity in academic performance between groups of students. It's gauged by proficiency scores, graduation rates, and a variety of other success measures. Now, starting this segment for us is an NBA Hall of Famer, a four-time NBA champion, and a man who is so committed to learning, he actually went and got a doctorate of education. Let's welcome Shaquille O'Neal. Okay, let's get right to it, Shaq. Why is helping students have the tools they need to learn so important to you?
Well, Shaq School was invented by my mother, Lucille O'Neil, and she always told me to take care of the children, give them what they need. I remember certain times where I would have to use old notebooks, tear out pages from the previous year, put some Windex on the front and try to shine it up, get some old pencils and sharpen them up to make it look like I had new pencil sets. But also remember when my dad brought me new binders and new pencils and new pens and a compass for the first time. I actually felt smart. A lot of these kids don't have access to those needs, so any way I could, help provide those, I will always be willing, to do that. Because I think access to a quality education is a human right. Every child deserves to be prepared and they need these accesses and supplies and resources.
Well, of course, everything you're saying, Shaq, obviously is so meaningful and it resonates, but why, even at this point in your career, are you so motivated? What is it that motivates you in this way?
Since 1992, I've been committed to help wherever I can, and supporting teaching kids has always been part of that. Again, no child should be able to go without the basic needs that they need to prepare themselves for the future. Look, I love children and I love elderly people. Whatever I can do to help them and make them smile, help them become, help them follow their dreams, I'm all for it.
Okay, let's go back to what's making me smile, though. Why did you pursue this doctorate of education?
I wanted to challenge myself. Being a successful athlete is fun, but I wanted to set a good example for my children and all the children I follow me, because education really matters. My parents did a wonderful job of preparing me. They would always start their students off, what if? What if you blow your knee? What if you're not that good? What if you have to retire early? What are you going to do? What are you going to have to fall back on? I think education exposes a person to share knowledge and instill self-discipline. And, a degree, whether high school or doctoral, I think it's the finish line, simply a mile marker. So, you just don't learn as a kid. I keep learning every day.
You said that you've been fueled to help in this area for 2 decades now, almost 2 decades. What gives you hope when you look at the challenges and the possibilities as we move forward in the years to come?
With the pandemic really placing the spotlight on challenges that have been around for decades, I think now is time, an opportunity for everyone to come together and work for equal access to worthwhile education for all kids. The children of the future. I think we all are collectively responsible to give them the best path forward. That's what you're supposed to do as a parent, as a educator. We're supposed to make sure that they have the right path. Teachers cannot do it alone. School system can't do it alone. But I think if we can involve everyone in the communities, I think we can make a difference for these children.
Shaq, thank you so much. Thank you for making this time and clearly for caring so much again. Our next guest is Justice Alan Page, whose biography is actually right over my shoulder there. Justice Page was a quarterback-eating defensive lineman, the first and one of only two guys on the defensive side of the ball who's ever been named NFL MVP. He went to law school and was the first African-American elected to the Minnesota Supreme Court, where he served for more than 2 decades. Now, when he went into the NFL Hall of Fame, Justice Page used that induction speech to advocate for the education of this country's children. The Page Education Foundation, founded by both Justice Page and his late wife, Diane, has provided more than $15 million in grants and helped more than 8,000 students of color in the state of Minnesota. Justice Page, thank you for making time for us today, and I may be sending you that book for an autograph, if you don't mind.
No problem. I look forward to signing it for you. Thank you for having me today. And let me just say, I am the father of a teacher and the father-in-law of a teacher. I understand the importance of education. Indeed, I've been thinking about these issues for more than 50 years. I was fortunate enough that I had parents who knew and understood that education was a tool that could be used to help me achieve whatever my hopes and dreams were for the future, make my future better than the future that they had, and in some ways mitigate the effects of being an African American growing up in this country. I started playing football, and for who knows what reason, you get put on the pedestal, and people would ask me to come and talk to young children about the value of the values to be learned from football and the values to be learned in school. And of course, at that point, I'm still a kid myself. I'm not sure I knew or understood what it was that I was supposed to be talking about. But over time, and over the last, as I say, 50 plus years, I've spent time in schools and classrooms across this country, talking with young children about the importance of education and how they can use it as a tool to change their futures, to make their futures better than what it might otherwise have been. As you noted, in 1988, my wife Diane and I started the Page Education Foundation. And the reason we did that, because my experience in the law, my experience as a football player, and I should point out just one thing, one of the other things that sort of focused me on this area is that as a child, when I started playing football, growing up in Canton, Ohio, a lot of great young men who were great athletes, who went on to college, but would end up back in Canton, hanging out in the street corner, unemployed and unemployable, having difficulty reading and writing. It took me a while, but I finally figured out that what I was seeing was an academic problem, not an athletic problem. I mean, if somebody is smart enough to learn how to play the game of football, they are smart enough and evidently have the ability to work hard enough to perform in the classroom. That's why I used the opportunity on my induction into the Hall of Fame to draw attention to this need to focus more on academics and let the athletics take care of themselves. That same year, 1988, Diane and I started the Page Education Foundation with the goal of motivating, encouraging, and assisting young men and women of color in the pursuit of education. We do that 2 ways. One, by providing financial assistance to high school graduates who want to go on to post-secondary education. Our purpose is to lift people up, not filter them out. So we call them paid scholars. Our scholars have abilities ranging from some of the best and brightest to kids who struggled in school. Our view of the world is every child and every young person should have the opportunity to advance themselves educationally. And so our kids go to community colleges, vocational technical schools, the University of Minnesota, some of the state's best private colleges and universities, all with the goal of lifting themselves up for the future. But most important, we require our grant recipients, our paid scholars, to go back into the community where they come from, back into the communities where they go to school to work with young children, kindergarten through 8th grade, specifically in the area of education as tutors, mentors, and role models. Sending the strong, clear message to those young people that education is a tool that can be used to change the future. Those young people get to see somebody who looks like them, maybe is from their neighborhood, has some shared experience, actually using education. And we think over time that we have had a tremendous impact on young people in this community. The other project I've been working on, and this is in the last couple of years, been involved in an effort to amend Minnesota's Constitution to make a quality public education a civil right for all children. Currently, our state constitution, as all state constitutions talk about education, ours focuses on the education system. But the reality is that we're not educating a system, we're educating children. And so we think it's important to put children first and to make their education a constitutional right so that every child has the opportunity to achieve their highest potential. I've just been fortunate enough to be in a position where I've been able to try to do some of these things to make this world a better place.
Justice Page, as I listen to you, I keep hearing in my ear my father's voice, my father, a dark-skinned immigrant who always told us, education is the great equalizer. See, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Thank you so much for your words and for sharing this time with us. Next, this is a tough act for you to follow, but let's say hello to Eric Gordon. Eric is the CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. He's one of the architects of the Cleveland Plan, which is a revolutionary program to transform public schools that was approved with bipartisan support in this day and age. Now, this program has resulted in a very significant increase in graduation rates. And we know that Mr. Gordon is joining us in a very good mood tonight. And that is because his Cleveland Browns, who are a partner in your mission for educational improvement, correct, finally seem to have a head coach. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
Thanks so much for having me here this evening. And yes, we are very, very proud of our Browns, both for what they do on the field and what they do in our community, particularly with kids in need and our schools. I want to take my few minutes today actually to start where Jeremy led us, to just say the achievement gaps that we're talking about are not new, but what COVID did was make them unavoidable. So many people who have made a point of pretending they couldn't see those gaps now must confront the realities that are truths in communities like mine in Cleveland. I also want to say that, while I've been asked to share what we're doing about it, no one has solved this problem. And if they're telling you that they did, they're lying. And so I'm going to tell you what we're trying to do in Cleveland, both now and what we think we need to do post-pandemic, because I think both parts are true. Just to set the stage, Cleveland is a district of 37,000 kids, 86% of whom are children of color. We are the highest childhood poverty of any major city in the country. We have the worst digital connectivity of any city in the country, and we're the 9th most racially segregated. of any city in the country. And so while I'm very proud of Cleveland, those are some pretty dubious distinctions that feed into this challenge of solving this problem for our kids in our community. So what do you do about it? Some of the things we've done in the pandemic, first of all, we have 104 schools, 68 pre-K 8s and 36 high schools. And so one of the things we've done is use a lot of data and a lot of statistical analysis to find out where are those highest density underperforming or off-track students so that we can target our resources to supporting those young people. And it's really important to know who is struggling and then being able to directly support those young people and their educators. We also quickly redesigned our entire scope and sequence of curriculum to make sure that it was equitably accessible in a remote learning experience. Because again, as Jeremy said, in our community and so many others, many of our kids are still in remote experiences. That's true here in Cleveland. And so having a redesigned curriculum that ensured equitable access through the digital tools we were able to put in place became really important. We also have provided a great number of taped lessons where our students can come back and watch them over again, and that our teachers can share them. And so using canned content that lets us have both in live learning and also asynchronous times for students has been one of our strategies. And then supplementing that with office hours every Wednesday for help sessions for kids and targeted support, and where we ask children to come in. And of course, a lot of teacher learning with other teachers, particularly focused on engaging students and how do we engage in this new way when we're no longer face-to-face in so many of our settings. That's what we're doing now, but I would argue that what we do next is going to be every bit as important. And so we're considering things like creating regional learning pods and Saturday pods where students can help students and where we can actually be helping each other get caught up, and creating student agency where that they can be part of our solution of closing these gaps. Creating night access for our educators, particularly for career labs and things of that nature. Weekend and summer camps for kids to be catching up, and intersession programs as well. We're also thinking about using our staff in very different ways, assigning different kinds of roles instead of teachers being generalists, some who do curriculum design really well, others who really work well in a remote environment, some who are just fantastic in the classroom, and a number of other strategies like those that I think are really critical. And so I would leave us with the very short time I have to say, the people here listening and accepting this challenge of solving this problem once and for all for our kids and community, think both about how we're continuing to respond in the pandemic, but that the pandemic is a severe but temporary problem. And it's what we will do when we renew post-pandemic to finish this unfinished learning and close these gaps and create better, just, and good systems for kids that will matter most. So thanks again for having me, and I look forward to the continued conversation.
No, thank you for being here, but please don't go anywhere because we'd like to bring Justice Page back, and we have a few questions from our audience for the two of you. Let's start with you, Justice Page, if you don't mind. We
Sure.
all obviously want students to succeed in the classroom and reach their fullest potential, but often there is administrative red tape or there's a lack of funding. If you had your druthers, what is one action that you would take that you believe would help level the playing field across the country for students?
I think it's putting children first, educating individual children. When we talk about school, and I'm fascinated to listen to what's going on in Cleveland, because it sounds like they're looking at trying to educate individual children. Every child is different, learns differently, has different background, different experiences, and we have to figure out how to educate individual children. And red tape, money shortages, those things exist, but we're not teaching red tape. We're not teaching funding issues. We're teaching children. And so we have to figure out what is the best way to provide an individualized education for all children. And I would just note, we talk about achievement gaps. The suggestion in that, achievement gaps, opportunity gaps, whatever you want to call them, The suggestion is that children have failed. This is not a child problem. This is an adult problem. And if there's a failure, it's the failure on the part of us who are adults.
Okay, so Mr. Gordon, as you hear Justice Page say that, what is the pragmatic, realistic way that a teacher in a classroom full of so many children who are motivated in different ways and who come into that classroom with different backgrounds, how can a teacher help eliminate what Justice Page very rightly is saying should not exist, an achievement gap? Can you give us an example of a teacher who can do that or who has done that, even without resources?
Sure. Well, first of all, Justice Page is exactly right. This is an adult problem, not a kid problem. So we have to refocus how we think about this. Instead of thinking about the deficits that we somehow assign to kids, you're not where you're supposed to be. We actually need to figure out where they are, what their assets are, and then what is the unfinished learning. And so teachers can do a lot, but if we actually structure our systems differently and say, how do we group kids so that they are, maybe multi-age group, but kids are similarly in an experience, and we can move them forward, as opposed to this notion that we're going to fill in the missing learning and teach new content. If we have a much more personalized experience for students, if we have a more mastery orientation, that you move to goalposts, and when you've achieved that, you move on. That we, say some kids who are those stuck stars can go off and work on a project together, so that the teacher has a smaller class of kids who, reluctant learner, not going to put my hand up in front of that, Justice Page, who's so smart, and I don't want to be embarrassed in front of him. But now the teacher has a smaller class. There are many things we can do if we are really ready to reinvent systems for kids instead of perpetuating the systems of efficiency for adults. And that's what you're hearing Justice Page say, and it's the same message that I'm offering here in Cleveland. And I am going to take a moment to say, Justice Page, welcome back home to Northeast Ohio anytime. A kid from Canton, a Hall of Famer from Canton, you're still a Northeast Ohio guy in our case.
Well, thank you. I should note, you talked about my biography. I've had the good fortune of writing 4 children's books with my teacher daughter. One of them, the idea for the book was germinated in a Cleveland school classroom some 30 years ago. Alan and his perfectly pointy and possibly perpendicular pinky.
All right. I'm going to look for that.
Well, me too. As the mother of 2 small children, then I certainly need to add those books to this bookshelf. If I can have both of you for one more minute. Mr. Gordon, you talked about COVID being a temporary situation. You've both mentioned this as sort of exacerbating issues. Is there one thing that each of you thinks has actually been beneficial in undergoing learning under this cloud of COVID that we can take with us next year when hopefully the world returns to normal? And I apologize, that is one of those children, Justice Page, who should be reading a book with her father.
I'll offer from Cleveland's perspective, we're now a one-to-one technology district, and you're going to talk about digital divide next, but it is a crusade we're on here in Cleveland to make the internet a public utility. And every one of our students has their own device now, and that will always be a truth going forward. And that was not even a prospect last March 13th. So if something good came of it, it's that my students finally have the tools that so many of their peers have, and our commitment to keep those tools in their hands.
And, between COVID and social unrest, from my vantage point, the good thing that is going to come out of this is a light has been placed on this issue, which will not go out. It absolutely will not and cannot go out. We've been good at sliding it under the rug, talking about it. Well, the light that's on it now will not allow us to keep doing that.
Well, we certainly hope, and we know we can count on the Kids in Need Foundation, right, Justice Page? And you, of course, the Page Foundation, and
Absolutely.
Mr. Gordon, everyone here. Thank you so much, both of you gentlemen. And Now we have another gentleman who is following in Justice Page's footsteps to some degree to the issue that you mentioned, Mr. Gordon, and that is the digital divide. We're going to start with six-time Pro Bowler, our reigning NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year, and one of my absolute favorite people in or out of football, Calais Campbell. Now, in his day job, Calais is a terrorizing defensive end for the Baltimore Ravens. Outside of that, he's a dad, and he is a computer handing out benefactor. Through Calais's CRC Foundation, he has given more than 100 students the ability to engage in the remote learning that Mr. Gordon was just talking about that they otherwise would not have had. So Calais, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. You know, I take great pleasure in being able to give back and try to help the next generation. You know, and I have so much respect for all the teachers in this world, and especially just, you know, in our environment. They have the toughest job. You know, the job the teachers do is just, I mean, I feel like you're arming our kids and empowering them for the future. You know, I take great pride, and I love all you teachers. So thank you very much.
Well, Calais, let's start there then. Of all the different ways that you could support and help kids, why is tackling the digital divide amongst students number one on that list?
I would say that, well, first things first is if you don't have the right tools, if you can't prepare like you're supposed to, you're going to fall behind. And if you fall behind, it makes it so much harder to catch up. And I think about from a football standpoint, if I don't have cleats or a helmet or pads, I can't go out there and play football. You know, you have to have the proper tools. And so, you know, this day and age, technology is such a big part of learning. And kids not having it is just, I mean, it's a sad thing, you know, and it's something that, you know, it can be easily fixed. And it takes people like, you know, like all of us, you know, in these foundations, what we do to step up and help, and you know, where we have to. And I really commend Mr. Gordon for, you know, making sure every kid in Ohio has a computer, has a you know, a technology device to be able to learn from, and that has to be the standard going forward. And I'm gonna try to do my part to help. You know, this is such a big deal, and it needs to happen. And it just, you know, hopefully in due time it will.
Well, if you could share with the education advocates that are joining us tonight, one thing that you think they could do to address the digital divide where they live, even if they can't themselves buy 1,000 computers or 1,000 tablets, what's one thing that they could do?
Well, I think we need to figure out partnerships in creating, you know, a communication system or whatever it may be. I mean, we have social media, which is a great tool. And there are so many kids in need, but a lot of times, like guys like me who want to help people, sometimes we have a hard time finding the right people to help. And so just communication and the right partnerships to be able to, you know, you find the people who are trying to do the same thing and help and team up, partnership and synergy, you know, I guess is what I'm looking for. But, you know, I have so much passion. I want to help as many kids as possible. And I know so many other guys who play in the NFL who want to do the same thing. And a lot of times it's just trying to figure out how to do it the most efficient way. And so with teachers and all the, you know, administrators in the school system, you know, working together to figure out how we can, you know, bring awareness and raise funds and be able to, you know, put the proper technology in the kids' hands.
Well, hopefully this is one of those steps in that process, right, Calais? Thank you. Thank you so much for helping us out, especially during dinner time. All right, here comes another resident of Baltimore, and that is Councilman Zeke Cohen. Zeke is actually a former teacher, and he was recently very successful in getting the federal government to reimburse the city of Baltimore for 12,000 Chromebooks and internet access for students. So, Councilman Cohen, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be with you. And thank you to the Kids in Need Foundation as well for your incredible work. So yeah, I began my career as a teacher here in West Baltimore and in South Baltimore. And I taught in two communities that had been largely left behind. Sandtown was the place where Freddie Gray grew up, was poisoned by lead paint, and then ultimately died in police custody. And so many of my students experienced elevated levels of trauma, witnessed violence, and learned in schools like the two that I taught in that lacked heat, air conditioning, or drinkable running water. A big part of why I decided to change my career and go into city government was that I realized that poverty doesn't happen by accident or by personal failure. It is the product of public policy. And for too much of Baltimore's history, institutional racism has guided our policy making. In 1910, our city enacted one of the first and most sweeping ordinances to codify racial housing segregation through charter, creating separate housing for Black people and for white people and for Jewish people like me. In the 1940s, our government colluded with banks to redline Black and brown communities, excluding Black people from owning homes or getting typical mortgages and loans. And what I didn't realize at the time when I was a teacher, teaching middle school history in West Baltimore, was that our city has also experienced digital redlining. And what I mean by that is that according to a study from 2018, 40% of Baltimoreans lack home wireline internet access, 40%. And if you overlay redlining maps from the 1940s of who couldn't get loans, they track extremely closely with who doesn't have internet access in their homes today. And obviously in 2018, that was a major problem, having almost half of our city in predominantly Black neighborhoods not have access to the internet. But in 2020, that became a crisis as the COVID-19 pandemic hit Baltimore and everywhere else, and everybody was forced online. Our kids, of course, were forced to learn online. All of school went digital. And so during the first few months of the pandemic, I started hearing from teachers, from students, from parents that this was a crisis because kids didn't have internet access. And to what Calais was able to do, kids also didn't have digital devices, right? Kids didn't have laptops, didn't have Chromebooks. And so working with a coalition of students, we quickly mobilized. I was able to pass a resolution with my colleagues on the council calling on us to get involved in helping to close the digital divide. And then in the quickest succession, I think in Baltimore city government history, we passed a bill that you mentioned to move $3 million to quickly purchase Chromebooks and laptops for over 10,000 kids in our city and also help them get online. We did this in partnership with students and parents and teachers and athletes and everyone. And what we know is that closing the digital divide is going to take all of us working together hand in hand. The last comment I wanted to make is that I see internet access. We need to start thinking of internet access as a public utility, something that is just absolutely necessary for everyone in the year 2021, just like electricity was necessary in the 30s and 40s, and FDR, the president, then rushed to get rural electrification. We have to have that same intensity to bring the internet to every single child in Baltimore, in Cleveland, and across our country. Because without internet access, kids can't learn, many adults can't work, and regardless of color or creed, we deserve to live in a city and a country where everyone is able to attain an excellent education and to learn online.
Councilman Cohen, thank you. And you actually just made my job so easy because exactly what you said segues perfectly to our next speaker. And that is Mary McLaughlin, who is Comcast's Senior Vice President of Internet Essentials, Community Impact and Engagement. It is her mission to address the barriers to connectivity in the certain communities, just as you're talking about. So Mary, please take it away.
Thanks, Aditi. I am thrilled to be here today and so interested in what all the other speakers have to say. And I think that we've heard pretty clearly about some of the barriers to digital equity and successful virtual learning. And there are many, right? Connectivity, access to devices, a lack of digital skills, parental challenges, home and family environment, and housing instability. There's not a single solution to the problem, and as Councilman Cohen said, no one of us can solve it on our own. So where Comcast is uniquely positioned really is in the area of connectivity, device access, and digital literacy. And we've been doing this for the last 10 years via our Internet Essentials program, which is our signature broadband adoption program. When we started the program 10 years ago, we pledged to connect as many underserved families as possible because we recognized the importance of all children having equal opportunity to educational resources. You've heard it said already here tonight, education is the great equalizer. Over the past 10 years, we've enhanced the Internet Essentials program several times, and it continues to be one of the nation's largest, most comprehensive broadband adoption programs. It's always been important to the community, and it's always been important to us for the last 10 years, but post-COVID-19, it has taken on an even greater importance in the communities that we live and serve. And so last March, we galvanized the whole organization, the whole company, to really lean into the Internet Essentials programs, and we made several enhancements to the program. So we increased the speed for Internet Essentials. We now offer 60 days free Internet Essentials to all new customers, and we've extended that multiple times. Right now, it's extended through the end of July 2021. We've removed bad debt restrictions so more people can apply. We've launched enhanced cybersecurity controls and parental controls for Internet Essential customers. And we've worked with many families who can't pay their bills in order to help set up payment plans that extend over 12 plus months. So, as we talked about before, we know that no one can do it themselves, and it's very important to have private and public partnerships. So a couple of things that we've done in that regard is we established the Internet Essentials Partnership Program. And it's designed to partner with cities and school districts and other organizations really to support getting large groups of students online. We've partnered with hundreds of organizations, including schools in Chicago, Atlanta, Sacramento, Pittsburgh, Portland, Arlington, Virginia. And this all means that more students have a greater opportunity to get connected. We also recognize that not everybody has the opportunity or the setup to learn at home. So we recently announced that we're investing to create 1,000 plus community impact centers, community connectivity zones called LIFT zones. And those will really support a safe space for children to learn while they're not able to be in school or around BAU school time hours. They can also be a destination to provide digital skills and training for adults. We announced this towards the end of last year. We're happy to say we have over 300 LIFT zones already up and running across the country and looking to do 1,000 by year end. So we're working as hard as we can to get those set up and up and running. We've heard a couple of times the message that no one of us can solve this problem. We can't do it alone. We're committed to doing our part to get everyone connected, and we're grateful for all the stakeholders here today and for partnering with them. Thank you, Aditi.
Sorry, thank you, Mary, very much. Let's go on to Dr. Granita Lathan, who, as the interim superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, I'm sure has been paying very close attention to what you're saying. Dr. Lathan has led the distribution of more than 110,000 digital devices and 36,000 hotspots to make sure that all 209,000 of the students in her district could indeed be taught remotely this past year. Dr. Lathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you for having me, and to my colleagues, thank you again for the opportunity today. Just want to share that, 78% of my students are economically disadvantaged. And last year, when we were confronted with the digital divide, we thought about just our students, but we were also surprised that a number of our teachers did not have access. So think about in March of 2020, we're saying go 100% virtual. Students are going to learn at home. Teachers are going to teach from home. And I had teachers that also needed devices. So not only have we addressed the digital divide for our students, and with the support of my Board of Education, we've spent $54 million to ensure that every child in our district that has requested a device or hotspot, that they have received it. And we've spent another $38 million on just COVID mitigation strategies. And as we continue to move forward, we're challenged that our parents are losing their jobs, they're losing their homes. Now, these were things our families were already experiencing pre-COVID, but COVID, of course, has increased that need in our community. One of the other strategies that we've utilized in our district over the past several years is providing wraparound services to our students and their parents. Currently, we have 210 wraparound specialists serving our 280 campuses. And their primary responsibility is to connect parents with non-academic supports. That's very important because yes, we can address the academic needs, but if children arrive to us hungry or homeless, they don't have the health support that they need. And so we're standing in the gap for our families, but we need that continued support. Our legislative session started on January 12th. And so we're pushing on our Texas lawmakers to reestablish what we call our telecom discount program. It provided schools and libraries with substantial discounts on internet access, and it saved districts a great deal of money. We're also going to be pushing on them to support us in the event that we need to move back to 100% virtual education, that we receive full funding. Our state is one that has, basically mandated that we provide in-person instruction. And so currently we have about 44% of our students, which is about 86,000 students. And I really want to pause and thank my principals and teachers, parents, and students, and all members of Team HISD, because think about it, 86,000 students daily are actually receiving face-to-face instruction in our district. And we are very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. We're still very concerned about learning loss, and we know we will need additional financial support in the upcoming years to support those students that were already behind pre-COVID, but continue to struggle, they have continued to struggle in a virtual environment. And so we are asking all of our lawmakers. On yesterday, I met with some of our elected officials. They were in town from Washington and have said, I need your support. I need your support financially, but I also need your support where we provide additional mental health supports, not only for our students, but our staff members. And so I just want to reiterate and just say again, I thank all members of Team HISD for their support. I'm still very concerned about, of course, the virus. We've done a great job of making sure that it's not spreading on our campuses or across our district, but I'm still concerned about community spread. I thank our partners. We've partnered with Verizon, Sprint. They've provided devices. They've provided hotspots. The Moody Foundation has purchased devices for our students. So once again, we've closed that digital divide, but we're going to need to replenish those devices. So students, like this, it will become just a nest, just like a pencil and a pen. Many, many years ago, when most of us were in school, we will need that. And so thank you again for having us. Mr. Campbell, can you just do me one favor and call Deshaun Watson and ask him to stay? We don't have a coach, but I still need Deshaun Watson to stay in Texas. That's for my colleague, Eric Gordon, that has a coach in Cleveland. Thank you again for having me.
I'll give him a call, see what I can do,
All right, well, Calais, come back. Councilman Cohen, come back. Our panelists, please come back. But we have a few audience questions for you as well that are actually not football related. Dr. Lathan, I want to start with you simply because of what you were just saying. Clearly, there has been a level of success in getting devices and getting access to Wi-Fi to your students now. But as you just said, this is going to be a constant problem or constant issue challenge. So what are some practical ways that teachers can support students who may not have access and may be ashamed to admit that their families don't have access?
That's an excellent question because, we've pushed out information and communication and we still have parents that are apprehensive, like you said, about sharing. One of the ways we've addressed it, actually several ways. Number one, we have provided since March 12th of last year, massive food distributions across our city at various locations to support our families as it relates to their food needs. But also during those times, we're reaching out to parents, seeing what their other needs are. We also have what we call HISD TV. Our teachers are actually recording lessons based on our curriculum. And so parents are able to access those lessons at night, after school, on weekends. We also initially, when the pandemic hit, we provided paper-based instruction for all of our students. So they could pick up those paper packets or we mailed them out and then they could return them to their campuses. And so we are still trying to reach, and especially, you know, in a city like Houston, we have a number of our students that are immigrants. We are really trying to reach out because we want our parents to know our schools are safe places for their children to learn, but it's also okay for them to tell us that they are in need.
Okay, great. And I hope that they listen. Thank you, Dr. Lathan. Zeke and Calais, if the two of you will come and join us now. Calais mentioned partnerships earlier. When I look at you two gentlemen, I see a very natural partnership. So let me ask both of you, what opportunities do you see for creative partnership? What are ways that different people and different organizations can work together to get these digital tools into the hands of students and teachers? Go ahead, Councilman Cohen. Zeke, you can start us off here.
Sure. So, look, I think that in a city like Baltimore, where you have so many good people who want to do right by our children, what we saw in the beginning of the pandemic and really all the way through was an absolute scramble to get devices into the hands of kids and to get internet access to families. So again, I want to thank Calais for the work that he did. I want to thank the Baltimore Ravens, who are always leaders in our town, but also our incredible teachers who are literally out there handing out devices house to house, giving out the Chromebooks. My colleagues on the city council who in warp speed, I've never seen folks move that quick to pass a bill to move $3 million from our general fund to get over 10,000 Chromebooks out to our kids. The work that even students themselves have done, right? No one likes learning in this digital space. Kids want to be together in person, but because of the deadliness of this virus, we know that young people have had to learn online, and we've seen a lot of student leadership. They really called on us to deliver devices, to get them internet access. They were the leaders in the fight to close the digital divide in Baltimore. So to me, this has really been a story of a city coming together and scrambling on behalf of its children and fighting really hard for a future where everyone's connected.
Okay, Calais, this was just your first year in Baltimore. So now as you listen and with what you were able to do, what's a creative partnership that you'd like to pursue or that you'd like to see around the country?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of ideas. There are so many different things you can do. But, for me in the education world, I think reading is something I really want to push in the Baltimore community. And, I don't know, I'm trying to find creative ways to be able to get involved with the teachers and to create, a book club or some kind of active reading program where, us as athletes, and, some of my teammates, we make reading cool, because a lot of them, we talk about books and we share books with each other all the time. And it'd be cool to be able to do that, with our leadership and our teachers, and especially the kids.
Calais, I'd love to connect with you after this panel and get you connected. Like I said, I used to teach. It's still near and dear to my heart, and most of my best friends are teachers. So would love to see that push on literacy.
Okay, let's make it happen.
My man.
I don't know if anybody can see Corey, but he better be fist bumping right now because that was the goal of tonight. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Of course, Dr. Lathan and Mary, thank you for your time in discussing the digital divide, which hopefully will not be widening and will actually be getting smaller. Let's once again quickly take a very quick break and mention the sponsors who've made tonight possible. ECRM, Blue Sky, PNC Bank, SureTape, Zappos, and of course, Internet Essentials from Comcast, Trox, Zebra Pen, and Highway Credit Union. Okay, moving right along. Oh, which that reminds me. Actually, let me go backwards 1 second. Calais, Brandon Carr did exactly that, reading in Baltimore. Look that up.
Okay.
Brandon Carr, he had a really good reading system in Baltimore. In any case, okay. Moving on, our next speaker is Courtney Jones. Courtney Jones is the founder of the Clear the List Foundation. She connects educators to donors and corporations who want to clear the sometimes very, very, very long supply lists that school districts can't cover and that teachers often end up filling themselves. Courtney, please tell us more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We know right now that unity has been a really large rallying point in so many ways, and I'm sure we can all agree that no one deserves it more than our students and teachers. As with every aspect of our lives, we can accomplish more together, as that's been a common theme tonight. That singular idea is the backbone of Kids in Need Foundation, Clear the List Foundation, and other organizations all across the country, whose missions are to connect educators with community resources that can enhance these learning opportunities for all students. We have a collective responsibility to ensure that these kids have equal opportunity and access to quality education, and we must provide teachers with ongoing support so they can focus at the job at hand. As an educator myself and the founder of Clear the List Foundation, I'm proud to raise awareness for Champions for Education. And we're joined in this effort by 3 different entities who likewise share our passion for education. So a big thank you to Box Tops for Education, Teacher List, and American College of Education for your support. Now, from one educator to another, I'd like to introduce a special guest who has a message for us, a Screen Actors Guild Award winner and 2-time Golden Globe nominee. Welcome, Chrissy Metz.
Good evening. If we haven't met, I am Chrissy Metz. You might know me from NBC's This Is Us, but you might not know that one of my first jobs out of high school was a preschool teacher. I know how formative the classroom environment is for even the youngest children, and I know that kids learn best when they have tools to explore, to create and imagine possibilities for themselves and their future. Because of this, I couldn't be more thrilled to be a champion for education. 2020 elevated many challenges in our country, not in the least of which are the vast inequalities in education. Some students are learning right now in homes with multiple computers with access to any school supply that they want. Others are asked to do schoolwork without internet connection or basic school supplies. We know that not every school in America can ensure that all of its students have an equal opportunity and access to quality education. For the 15 million children living in poverty in America, regardless of whether they're in a classroom at home, tighter budgets mean school supplies are even more of a luxury. This is why we're here tonight, to join together to do our part in closing the disparity gap for students who need us most. We are here to say, enough is enough. All children in America can have access to supplies they need to learn, no matter where they live or how they attend school. We're here to do something that, though it might seem small, like maybe a backpack, it has a huge impact for good. So when under-resourced students receive supplies they need, students are empowered to recognize that they have the choice and opportunity to make decisions to pursue their dreams for their future. They can believe themselves anew. And isn't this what we all want for our nation's children? A quality education, a gateway to opportunity, a hope for their future.
Thank you, both Courtney and Chrissy, for that. Okay, let us move to our last topic of the night, and that is student absenteeism. Now, this is a chronic challenge nationwide for underserved schools, but it's actually doubled since the start of the pandemic. And so to kick us off on this topic, we're going to go to Thaddeus Bullard. He is actually more prominently known as WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. And Mr. Bullard credits his childhood as his inspiration. He started the Bullard Family Foundation, and through that, he has supported thousands of under-resourced students with supplies. And so Titus had to make a last-minute adjustment. Instead of joining us via Zoom, we were lucky enough to catch up with him at WWE's offices. Titus, welcome.
Thanks, Aditi. The thing that motivates me the most about my work now with kids is from my past. You know, I was always labeled a kid that would be dead or in jail by the time I was 16. And I believed that for a greater time of my young adult life. And going to a place called the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch down in Live Oak, Florida. More importantly, a conversation I had at 12 years old when a gentleman when I was getting in trouble and actually getting ready to get discharged from the program, had a conversation with me, and he said, "Why do you think it is that you get in trouble all the time?" And I said, "I don't know, man. I'm just a bad kid." And I had my head down, and he said, "Lift your head up." He said, "There's no such thing as a bad kid." And at that time, I asked him, why is it or how is it that you could say that there's no such thing as a bad kid when I've been suspended from school left and right, getting into trouble, and now I'm getting ready to get kicked off the boys' ranch for fighting again. And he said, "Well, I'm not gonna give you the answer to that, because I truly believe in my heart that you're gonna turn things around as you get older. In the meantime, I'm gonna tell you something, and I want you to believe it." He said, "I love you and I believe in you." Now, a lot of people had told me that they loved me up to that point, but then turn around and abuse me, beat me, cuss me, etc. But nobody had ever said that they believed that I can do anything. It was the complete opposite, that I would be dead or in jail by the time I was 16, that I would never graduate from high school. I was too uncoordinated to go to college. The list went on, and I believed that. And not getting that answer at the moment, it kind of threw me for a loop, but I needed to understand that I need to believe in myself. And that gentleman, Mr. Patrick Minogue, was the one that helped me understand that believing in myself would be the first step for me to move forward and to getting an education and to being all that I wanted to be in life. And I realized that equitable opportunities and equitable amounts of resources are the reason why I got into the position I'm in today. I went to a place I'm a product of a sexual assault. My mother was raped at 11, had me at 12. I grew up in the projects, told what I'll never do in life, and I believed it. As I got older, and as the gentleman said, I'd figure out the answer for myself. And what I do understand is that you have kids that are in bad situations, making bad decisions, and having bad outcomes. You take those same exact kids, which was me at the time, put them in a good environment around good people, and they have a greater chance to succeed. So my mission day in and day out is to put people in a better position and put them around better people so that they can have better outcomes. And I think that anybody that's in education wants the same opportunity, especially those that come from underserved communities. You're already behind the 8 ball from preschool all the way through middle school. And if somebody doesn't put you in a position to succeed and put people around you in a position that can give you hope and treat you with dignity and put smiles on your faces, then there's a pretty good chance that that generational curse that has cursed your family for years, or that child's family for years, will inevitably curse him or her. And so it's very important for me when I speak to educators and those in education or coaches, that they always understand that we might be the only "I love you" that those kids get. We might be the only hug that those kids get. You might be the only positive affirmations that that kid gets on a daily basis. And yes, it's very easy to get frustrated with what is not happening. But I think you should open your eyes and your mind into a broader space to find out what is happening. Why are the reasons that this kid's not successful? Why can't you reach a certain person? And even as adults, sometimes we have struggles. But I always go back to my childhood and remembering that someone told me that they loved me and that they believed in me when they had nothing to gain in return. They made that investment of words when they had nothing to gain in return. And because of that, I'm able to live a life day in and day out where I can exude that message that I love you and that I believe in you. And that would be my biggest takeaway from why I'm in the position I'm in, and why I passionately make sure that there's equitable treatment in communities across the country, not just in my home city of Tampa Bay, but everywhere I go. I want people to have equitable opportunities in education, because we all know whether that education is the form of getting a high school diploma or picking up a trade or going to college, or just a life education in itself, it's important. And for everyone involved, they need to understand the importance of taking that child and in certain positive words of affirmation in their life every single chance they get.
Titus, we desperately appreciate the time and the message. The way that you say that all it took was having somebody believe in you, I feel matters to every single one of us, whether we are a parent or an educator or a superintendent, that there can be that much power, that much magic in one simple phrase. So again, thank you. And let's now turn to a superintendent, in fact, the superintendent of the Hartford Public Schools, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez this past year has created a way for her staff to make 1,000 home visits possible and to make virtual tutoring possible for every single subject in every single grade. Please tell us more, and thank you for being with us, Dr. Torres Rodriguez.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad to be here just to talk about the impact, right, that the pandemic has had and the way that we have had to shift in order to meet the needs of our students. And I just want to check if someone's going to have, I thought I had some slides to share. Excellent. Thank you. So, when we think about the presentation tonight, I wanted to just cover one, chronic absenteeism in Hartford Public Schools, how the pandemic has increased the inequities, and some of the strategies that we have used to confront the challenge to serve our students better. Chronic absenteeism, in the spirit of transparency, has long been a focus of our district, and decreasing absenteeism has been a major goal of our strategic plan. And it was a little over 2 years ago that we had announced a citywide effort and a partnership with Hetty Chang and the Attendance Works to understand better the systemic barriers that existed and barriers that our families and our communities were encountering that were contributing to the chronic absenteeism. And just to highlight, looking back in this data display here, it was last February that we had convened an internal panel discussion with students and parents, administrators, our teachers, our staff, and our community partners to delve into our collective work on chronic absenteeism and discuss the successes and the continuing challenges after 1 year of really leaning in to this improvement effort. And at that time, we did report a meaningful decrease in chronic absenteeism compared to the same time the previous year among continuing student cohorts. And we were able to celebrate 41% of students who had been chronically absent the year before were no longer in that category. That is a drop that represents 1,600 students fewer chronically absent students out of our 18,000 students. And 3 weeks later, then the pandemic, changed everything for us and forced us to, shift to a digital learning, remote learning, and disrupted the momentum and the progress that we had made. And we can see in the next data display here that, despite the progress that we had made in reducing chronic absenteeism, the pandemic has created greater depth and breadth and inequity in student needs. We see that among our in-person learners, an average of 47% of students were chronically absent in the first quarter of the school year. And the chronic absenteeism rate is highest among our most marginalized students that live in high poverty areas, students that are learning English as a second language, students that have learning differences, and our students with unstable housing. And when we think about those gaps, they seem to widen for our students that are learning remotely. And we even see that currently our graduation rate, for example, for our 12th graders, 60% of our students are on track to graduate. So we know that we have a lot of work to do in the last, the second semester of the school year. And the pandemic has also revealed inequities in math and literacy. Students are struggling with math at key points in middle school. And we know that when we think about chronic absenteeism, that transition from middle to high school is a significant predictor of students being able to stay on track to graduate. And we see disparities here as well in terms of our literacy gaps with, big learning differences. For example, 68% of our English language learners and 56% of our students are most likely to be 2 or more grades behind. And so there are implications for us as we think about what does our recovery model, if you will, look like. And so our last data display here is a balcony view, right, of how these chronic absenteeism trends, have an impact on student learning and engagement, and where we are today, and having to develop a plan moving forward to address that. 25% of our elementary students are reading on grade level. 48% is the average chronic absenteeism rate, and we're projecting that, to have a 4-year graduation rate of 70%, which we're projecting a 2 to 3% decline. And so, when we step back, we have tried to have a holistic approach to meeting the needs of our students. You talked about the home visits. So over 1,500 home visits done by a collective team, not only school staff, but our community partners. Our meals, providing meals to students and their families, 360-degree communication so that we can maintain ongoing communication with our families. And then thinking about all the other needs, our tutorial supports for our students, for example. And so it hasn't been a one pronged approach. It is a multi-pronged approach to address student needs as it relates to chronic absenteeism.
Dr. Torres Rodriguez, thank you so much. And you mentioned Hetty Chang and a partnership with her. So I think it's only natural that we now go to Hetty Chang, who is indeed the director of Attendance Works. Hetty has spent more than 20 years working on family support, family economic success, education, and child development. And in 2013, she was named a Champion of Change by the White House for her focus on furthering African-American education. She also has just sent me the kindest possible message as my daughter loses her mind. So Ms. Chang, please take it away and give me a moment to try to quiet the baby.
Absolutely. I was a working mom, and that is our existence, and how we manage through life is balancing work and our kids. I want to start by going back to something that Justice Page said in the beginning. He talked about how this is actually work about individual kids. And what I want to say is that kids come to school when they feel hope. This is also part of what we just heard in the opening story for this segment. You come to school when you feel hope that you've got a better future, faith that school is going to be a place where you can get to that better future. When you have a voice in helping to shape that pathway, because you got to own that pathway, and when you have access to the resources and supports that we need. And what's happened under the pandemic is it's made obvious that so many kids don't have access to the resources that we need. But it's also made it overwhelming, because on one hand, we need a very individualized, personalized approach, which is why in Hartford, they're using these home visits, because that's so the epitome of a personalized connection between school and home. On the other hand, we need data to be able to help figure out who needs this most, because otherwise we can be overwhelmed by the scope of the problem. So if you show that first slide talking about chronic absence as an early warning sign, which I have to say, chronic absence wasn't even a term 10 years ago. This is something that I helped actually to create as a concept. We took attendance every day, but we didn't actually use the data to guide what we did. Chronic absence is when kids miss too much school, so much school, that they're academically at risk. Could be excused, could be unexcused, could be suspensions. I don't care why you're not in school. If you can't get access to the instruction, then it's a problem. And that was being masked by truancy, masked by average daily attendance. And if you look at the next slide, it just shows it matters for everything. It matters for reading at 3rd grade, passing your classes in middle school, graduating from high school. And what we know, though, if you go to the next slide, is that chronic absence is a sign when kids aren't experiencing positive conditions for learning, when they don't feel that school is physically or emotionally healthy and safe, or they don't feel a sense of belonging, connection, support, or they don't feel that what they're getting at school is academically engaging and challenging, or they're not surrounded by adults or peers who can support that. And the challenge in a pandemic is we got to get connectivity. And once you have that, you still have to build the capacity of a virtual system to be able to make sure that these positive conditions for learning are in place. And you have to make sure, if you're, as Leslie is doing, as many people trying to make an in-person system work, because you also recognize the value of in-person instruction. And so when you have high levels of chronic absence, maybe if it's in person, it may be because families still don't feel safe. I know you're doing your best and there's a lot, but it's a challenging thing, making families feel safe coming back to school in a pandemic. Or if it's virtual, maybe the virtual learning environment, we're still trying to feel emotionally safe or create that sense of connection. One of the things that we're starting to see is it has also brought home the truth that schools alone, no matter how good our educators, how good our superintendents are, they cannot do this work. It is truly a partnership. And we also have to think harder, if you look at the next slide, about what are the things we're going to anticipate. We're only through the first semester of school. We still have another semester of school to go to make sure that our kids get the learning they need so that we don't even have greater loss when we start up school again next fall. We have to anticipate what are those challenges. Some of those challenges are still about the economic stressors because kids are facing housing challenges. Their families are losing jobs, so they may be highly mobile. They may not have food. And that is, I know, something that the Kids in Need Foundation is focused on. But we also have to think about what's happening with virtual learning, where kids feel fatigued. So we got to find other ways of helping them learn that's just not on a Zoom camera. Or we have to make sure that how do we support folks with supervision with their kids? Sometimes, kids are at home and they have, maybe the older kid isn't getting to their class because they're helping their 3 siblings to get online. Or maybe you only have a grandparent at home, and that grandparent, especially let's take English learner immigrant families, they have no idea. Believe me, I've been helping my 90-year-old mother who actually does speak English to get online. They are not going to be the ones getting our first 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds to be able to participate in the virtual classroom. So then we have to think about, when do we need learning hubs where we can physically distance and still do that safely? Or when do we need to help have people calling in? There's all sorts of virtual ways, telephones, FaceTime, all these things work to help make sure that kids have some support so they can be online. We also have to look at what's happening with how we use our health resources. Maybe we have to, you prioritize who gets the vaccines, also your regular flu shots, but we have to use our resources and think ahead. Why would kids be missing school now? And what are the supports we need to have in place so that we can make sure they don't miss more school? And how might we do that in the summer? Now, part of this is also by knowing who are we worried about. And I'm almost done because I know we've been at this a long time. I want to show data from Connecticut and give a huge shout out to Connecticut. Connecticut is the first state in the country to produce chronic absence data for this year. We need to move data from being an autopsy that shows up the following school year, after which the school year is already done. You can't do anything about it. You can just know who did well or didn't, to a diagnostic. And that's what Connecticut did. They're collecting data every month and then they're producing it. And that takes courage because sometimes you get worried about what the data will say. But what the data shows is who do we most need to be worried about. And they've done that by showing it by student populations. That's that first slide. You see English language learners. You see kids who are in poverty. Homeless kids are also another challenge. And then in Connecticut, they started putting it out by district, geo-mapped, so that everyone can see where are these challenges. And the thing that's good about public data is it allows other partners in the community who may not typically be able to know where do we need to target our resources to have a sense of where that challenge is. So chronic absence is not the solution, but it offers us important clues about where we need to invest in outreach, support, relationship, barrier reduction now, so that we don't have an even greater challenge as we come back to the pandemic, and helps us think about where do we have to intensify the learning recovery next year. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Ms. Chang. And I should mention that at the top, I said I am the daughter of a teacher. I am the daughter of a math teacher who probably likes hearing all of this talk of data right now. So Ms. Chang, Dr. Torres Rodriguez, as you said, we are indeed running a little bit long, but we appreciate everyone for sticking with us. This conversation is just so vital and clearly going places that is meeting our expectations, exceeding our expectations. So very quickly, if I can just ask each of you a question from our audience. Let's start with you, Ms. Chang, if that's okay. Can you tell us how can community partners very specifically support attendance and engagement efforts and involve families in seeing how important attendance really is?
So first of all, as a community partner, I would find out in where you are, where are the schools that face high levels of chronic absence, and forge a partnership with their principal. Talk with their principal about what their challenges, what their gaps are, and figure out where you can actually help to put in place those resources. And that's where I would start.
I love how when you say it, it feels like it's a very clear blueprint right there for us. Dr. Torres Rodriguez, your turn. How can partners help reach out to students in grades 6 to 12 to find out what is going to keep them engaged in learning? And how can school districts support them differently than they do elementary age kids?
We have to ask our students directly, right? What are the supports, the engagement activities, incentives, connections that they need, leveraging our community partners, having our learning centers and seeing how is it that we can connect with our students on a one-to-one every week. The intervention and the enrichment is important, and also making sure that students, and Hetty referenced this before, really can access their learning, right? What exactly is that barrier? And, having the community-based organizations and our partners, they connect with families at very different levels, oftentimes than the schools do. That's why that partnership is so, so critical.
Thank you both, ladies. We all really appreciate it. And honestly, thank you to all of our speakers tonight for your insight, your ideas, and hopefully what are some really tangible, actionable ideas for our communities. Of course, thank you as well, one last time, to our Champions for Education sponsors, ECRM, Blue Sky, PNC Bank, SureTape, and Zappos, and Internet Essentials from Comcast, Trox, Zebra Pen, and Highway Credit Union. Okay, since nobody wants to listen to that anymore, as we say goodbye tonight, we truly, truly hope you feel charged to get even more involved than how you came in to this evening. This is very obviously a very, very critical mission. Every single child in America should have equal opportunity and access to a quality education, and every teacher must have the resources he or she needs to ensure the successes of their students. And so as a new organization, Kids in Need Foundation is wholly committed to bringing together every potential catalyst, volunteerism, partnerships, our voices. All of these are the things that can make a big, 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 significant difference. Thank you all for joining us at this inaugural Champions for Education. Please visit us at kinf.org. And please, if there is one thing you take away from tonight, let us not lose sight of the collective power we have to help America's students. Thank you, everybody.